Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the webinar Security and Business Continuity in Uncharted Territory, Considerations in the Age of COVID-19. My name is Kucharawa. I am Director of Cybersecurity at AF. For today's webinar, my co-panelists will be from our affiliates organizations, White Owl and PaperSafe. So I have virtually with me Holly Condon, Principal at PaperSafe, and Tony Fernandez, Director at White Owl. Let me give you some information about the session before we start. You will be muted during the presentations, but time allowing, we will have a Q&A. Please submit your questions using the Q&A button in the control panel. If we don't address them during the webinar, we will reach out to you after the webinar. We will send out presentation slides and the webinar recording in a follow-up email by tomorrow. For those of you who are interested in receiving CPE credit, please answer all 3 polling questions which will be asked during the webinar. The CPE credit certificates will be emailed to you by tomorrow. So let's get started. When you look at cybersecurity and COVID-19, this is the agenda that we have prepared for you. When we look at cybersecurity and COVID-19, there is already a vast amount of material out there about working from home, increasing phishing attacks, data backup planning, weakness in wireless networks at home, etc., etc. So for this presentation today, I have decided to do a slight format and present you with a series of questions, provoke your thoughts, and revisit decisions that your company had to make to remain operational in these extreme circumstances in a very short period of time. So let's start talking about the data, because everything boils down to protect the data. And we have evidence, although anecdotal, that companies shifted significant data workloads because of work from home necessity. So really, in these extreme circumstances, different companies have taken a different approach to tackle this solution. Some companies purchased vast amounts of laptops deployed to the employees' houses. Others shifted workloads to the cloud using virtual servers, virtual desktops, and other infrastructure as a service. Companies are using collaborative tools in the cloud, and others have opted to open their office services to be accessible from home. Each solution presents their own risk. What we have to understand now is where the data lies and what type of protections are surrounding the data. Remember, unmanaged or accounted data is data that is at risk of loss, risk of disclosure, or risk of integrity. Another important set of questions arise about endpoints. It is well known that most cyber attacks use endpoints at one point or another to launch attacks. And what is important here is to understand what new risks you are incurred by using personal devices or machines that were prepared to operate in a corporate environment and now they're operating from home. So for example, for personal devices, how are you sure they have the proper cybersecurity hygiene, or how healthy are these devices? How do you know they have proper antiviruses, that they are patched? These devices have proper encryption, even some mandate regulations that determine so. So based on the health of those devices, how you determine what level of access these devices have to your corporate data? For example, do you allow a personal device to copy data at the employee's discretion? Can that data then be copied to removable media, for example? How you monitor that activity? Are you allowing corporate data to be stored in devices that are not managed by the company? This presents serious risk for your data in terms of confidentiality, integrity, or availability. There is less risk, but there are also risks associated with using corporate machines at home. A lot of security functions typically in those machines are performed by what we call agents. These are special design software that protect the machines by either keeping them up to date, by reporting activity into servers, but when you transplant them away from their native environment, they may not function as intended. So you have to revise the posture of how well these agents are performing. Additionally, you have to understand what security functions are no longer available or applying to those devices. For example, firewalling, web filter, data backup on those devices, et cetera, et cetera. Let's talk a little bit about the users. Users in addition to endpoints is a huge role in cyber attacks. So in the corporate office, we pretty much have more visibility on what the user activity is. But in work from home scenarios, how do you know if a certain employee clicked into a phishing email? How do you know what that specific phishing email behavior was once upon triggered? Are you allowing employees to install applications? Some companies have allowed some flexibility to employees to install applications to be able to remain operational. Now think about what happens when a user that can install an application also clicks in a malicious email without detecting it. So how are you prepared for that? How are you separating the employee personal life from the digital lives? And very important, I'm not going to give any prescriptive directions here, but it's mandatory at this point in time that you have to have multi-factor authentication, especially if you're allowing your users to touch corporate data while away from the office. It's key that you need to measure what is your user behavior, what is the expected behavior, and monitor for any specific deviations. Let's talk about infrastructure resiliency. We've been talking about user endpoints, but let's take a look on the other side of the equation, on the server side. That is on your data center, office, or to a lesser degree of concern, to the cloud. All employees at the office were firewalled, they have web filtering platforms, intrusion prevention systems that would protect them against malicious websites, bad content, malicious pages, et cetera, et cetera. So how are you performing these functions where these machines are detached from those native environments? If your company was provided with remote access as an exception, and only a relatively small set of users are involved in accessing your network remotely, how are these servers performing now that you are using remote access in mass? As a rule, not longer as an exception. The same question applies about your infrastructure in terms of redundancy. What happens if a remote access server goes down? Potentially, that can bring down the whole operation. So these questions that were not as vital as they are before, they need to be addressed in the age of COVID-19. So we have other pressing questions. We always need to look at the triad: people, technology, processes. So the list of questions really exceeds the time allowed for this presentation, but I would like to highlight the provisioning and termination of employees now is critical. As companies adjust their sizes, as companies grant remote access, it's key that you have a formal and repetitive process to perform both operations in a consistent and repetitive manner. Also, we have to pay special attention to any new application provisioning. When companies went quickly to embrace new applications, they need to make sure they understand what are the security provided by such application. You have to do a due diligence on those type of applications to understand what is the environment they operate, how secure they are, and equally important, what level of access you are giving to employees to operate on those platforms. The last thing you want is an employee inadvertently, while accessing a cloud application, a new cloud application, in a couple of clicks, disclose all your company applications and data to the whole world. So that can be devastating for most companies. So in terms of personnel, as we observe significant amount of layoffs and furlough, it's important to understand how well your security operations in terms of protection, monitoring, and response to incidents can still be viable. If you operate an in-house security team, you need to start considering outsourcing certain functions that you may no longer have. And on a similar token, you need to be prepared to have backup personnel, to have duplicity of personnel for certain critical functions, especially for protection. So what happens if an employee is sick or can no longer work due to recent events in our country? You have to be prepared. Now, let's talk about finding the right answers for those questions. And unfortunately, I wish I could come here with a checklist of things to do, but reality, this is a rather complex problem and matter. And we believe it needs to be tackled strategically. So what I'm gonna do is give you some waypoints on how to better handle this new horizon that lies ahead of us. Since the rush for work from home happened rather quickly, the first thing you need to keep in mind, and we recommend, is to perform a risk assessment immediately so you can detect any security gaps that are critical and that you're not aware of. So you can put controls and mitigate these risks as necessary. It's important to now engage senior management, bring them understanding. There is a huge opportunity now to bring companies to be totally digital. And this is a chance to gain sponsorship to create a strategic plan for cybersecurity. And it should start by establishing a new vision where you just don't move parts, when you make them safe and efficient. And this is possible. During one of our presentations, specifically with Holly and PaperSafe, that it's possible to shift from older paradigms to newer, more efficient, and sometimes cost-saving platforms. When you establish a new vision, you need to consider the whole ecosystem, not only parts. You need to think about your employees, your technology, process, data, partners, etc. You have to consider in your vision that, yes, we are in an economic downturn, but you have to keep in mind your long-term objectives, as at one point in time, the economy hopefully will recover. Now, you need to create a new cybersecurity plan. So you have to really reevaluate your technology stack across all functions and determine proper levels of protection, monitoring, and response for every single new component or for every component that you are changing. It's recommended you choose flexible platforms. This is especially true when we have tight budgets right now. So you have the ability to scale up or scale down, and the cloud is quite enticing in that regard. And you have to have a strong emphasis, as we discussed, on data location, endpoints, user behavior analytics, and third-party risk management. Now, there is a new architecture called Zero Trust Model, which I cannot have enough time to discuss with you today, but I encourage you to read about it. It pretty much discusses a perimeter-less security model, which we believe is the model for the future. So you may consider start embracing that in your new cybersecurity plan. After you complete your cybersecurity plan, we recommend you do a new risk assessment before the implementation, so you are aware of any risks that may arise from your new platform. So with that, I conclude the initial part of this session, and I would like to present with a polling question. right? Let's see our answers. Well, interesting. We have almost half and half on significant additional risk. I wonder if that comes from SMBs or larger enterprises, and some additional risk, also 46%. We have actually 5 people that believe there are no additional risks brought by this regard. Thank you. Now I'm gonna pass to Tony, which will provide actually some of the question we just raised.
Thank you very much, Christian. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Antonio Fernandez. I'm a director of White Owl, director of the Managed Services Division. What we do is we provide managed services and IT consulting services to small to medium-sized businesses. I've been with White Owl almost 20 plus years, and what I would like to talk to you today will be the benefits of cloud-based virtual desktop and Microsoft 365 services in combination to try to address business continuity and security, all the questions that Christian mentioned previously. So I have my agenda here. We want to talk about how businesses rush to provide remote access and business continuity due to the pandemic. We're going to talk about how to plan now that has been about 2.5 months already since quarantine starts and people were asked to work from home. What to consider to provide remote access and business continuity the proper way, and try to address all those security questions and give that business continuity that everybody is looking for. For that, we are truly believe that the answer for that will be a cloud-based virtual desktop technology. We will go through the definition of what that means. What will be the benefits of having a technology as virtual desktop hosted regarding remote access and business continuity, and also the cost benefits, which is not only business continuity and letting users to connect from remote or home, but what are the costs and benefits that will come from that. And lastly, we'll talk about Microsoft 365 cloud services, just basically Office 365 with a new name, which I would like to mention that to you guys. And how can we leverage those services that probably you already have, but don't know that you can set up in order to provide continuity with also considering security risks. So due to the COVID-19 pandemic, small to medium-sized businesses were forced to accommodate remote access. I believe it was middle of March, people were asked to start working from home, not coming to the office. So IT was struggling and trying to find ways to provide critical application access and business and access to business resources to those to that workforce without too much time to properly plan for that transition. So my experience and the team that I handle, we were receiving calls and see how the dynamic was evolving around this. We have clients that were allowing the staff to take their equipment home because they didn't have proper equipment at home where they can perform the daily tasks that normally they were doing at the office. They were taking monitors and desktops. People that don't have laptops were doing that. This was again done to an attempt to provide this a seamless experience, because users have all their applications, desktops, favorites, access to share drive, all on that PC or system at the office that they were planning now to take home. After they did that and they set up at home, they knew that, well, I have all my applications running, but now I need to have access to that data. But that data now is back at the office. How can I connect from my home to that data, to those share drives, those not only map drives where people save files and collaborate? That was a challenge. And IT was struggling trying to create a secure connection over internet, from public internet people have at home, AT&T or Comcast, to try to have that access and interact with that office data and share resources. And finally, one of the most of best solution was to let users use their own PCs or systems at home, but with third-party tools, be able to connect to their office desktop, or even laptops left at the office turned on so they can remote in and feel like they were sitting in front of their office, at the office, at their system, having access to everything that they have normally when they were at the office. Softwares like LogMeIn and Remote PC or TeamViewer were all deployed trying to give that experience. So what we have learned about this, and how can we plan better now that we have been through a 2.5 months of providing all this access? And this might sound a little bit basic, but email systems and phone systems needs to be moved to a cloud-based. You cannot rely on having your phone system or your email system hosted on servers at your office, because you are now bound to what's happening at that office location. If you lose power, if you lost internet, now you are hindering the access to those systems, which are critical now these days. Where's my access to, where's my data? Access to company resources, like I mentioned before, your shared drives, your where you are saving your files, how you're printing, those multifunctional printers. How can you address, now that you are at home, how can I print when I'm accessing data? If I need to scan, which is going to be critical nowadays, and later when Holly intervened with PaperSafe, how can I scan remotely and be able to get that data stored on those shared drives? Also, what about those applications that they're not web-based? I mean, nowadays, probably 75–80% of applications are web-based, but still there's a small percentage of applications that are not hosted, and you have it on servers at your site, and that's how you provide access to those systems. How can we expose those and host it? So all those things need to be considered. Web conferencing and collaboration tools. Now that everybody's going to be working from home, we will need to think about how we going to interact with our peers, be able to have meetings. You have seen now the hype on Zoom and Microsoft Teams, all these tools to be able to have video conferencing and trying to interact with each other. And all of this considering how to do it securely, and try to address and make sure that we check off all those questions that Christian was mentioning before. So our solution, and a believer of the solution, is what we call cloud-based virtual desktop technology. And what the definition is a hosted system which is provisioned with a cloud provider infrastructure. When I mean cloud provider, we're referring to big names like Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services, and also Google has one that will let you allow users to securely access your company data, business applications, and resources from any location and from any device, providing seamless user's desktop experience. And what that means is anyone will be able to connect to these systems from, if you have a Mac or you have a Windows PC or an iPad, an Android, you will be able to get to the systems, connect, and you will have exactly the same experience as you were at the office. You might have heard names like Citrix and Microsoft Terminal Services. This is exactly using that technology, but hosted in a cloud service provider. So what are the benefits of going to a cloud-based virtual desktop technology? You can go to the next slide. Sorry, there. I'm sorry about that. The benefits for remote access business continuity are to achieve true business continuity. This will be eliminating on-site servers footprint at your office. It will reduce the IT equipment accommodations. You don't need to worry about special power that you will need to have if you have big servers redundant with redundant power supplies. You don't need to worry about having internet connection or switches or actually the infrastructure to be able to have those systems always on, because those will be hosted on Microsoft Azure or Amazon Web Services. Also, you will be able to use and talk about those web legacy applications that are not web-based. You will be able to install those applications in these hosted systems and be able to share it or be accessible for your staff. Users' workstations becomes now a simple terminal device used to connect to the cloud virtual desktop technology. So now you can have users working from their own PC at home, downloading an app, but be able to connect to this virtual desktop host environment that is controlled, is contained, and it will give you the security that you will need, addressing those questions that Christian was mentioning before. Because now the application processes are performed and handled by those hosted servers. The local systems are not running Microsoft Office anymore. It doesn't run all those applications. Everything is done through your virtual desktop session. And then because of that, the virtual desktop session also goes wherever you go. So it doesn't matter if you connect from home, if you connect from your office, if you connect from any device, you will always have the same experience by having your same desktop profiles. You will have same favorites, same access to your data, same shared drives, access to that application, legacy application that you need. Everything will be accessible from any device. So now we want to talk about the cost benefits. The cost benefits, again, we don't need to worry about buying servers or worrying about extending warranty on hardware that we are or that we have at the office. Everything will be what we call virtual servers hosted in those cloud hosted providers. You only need to worry about pay on resources that you consume. So think about the electricity. The electricity, those servers that you can turn off or downsize what you don't need, like off hours, the less that you will pay on a monthly basis, because Microsoft cloud services, as well as Amazon and other hosted providers, they pay or they charge by consumption. So what we have helped clients is set up schedules where we downsize servers accordingly depending on the load of users connecting of those systems. We now clients don't need to provision high-end laptops or systems to users because, like we mentioned before, processes will be run from those hosted systems on the cloud. So you can really either get low-end devices to your staff or extend the devices that you have, the lifetime of those devices, you can extend it even more. You will reduce the IT cost of provisioning or support those virtual desktop users because, again, users will be having just a shortcut to connect to the hosted systems. So those IT people, the attendees that are on the IT divisions or departments that are getting all this calls from different devices that they need support, now that will got reduced because instead of handling 50, 100 PCs, now you only need to handle 5 or 6 servers that will host those 50 to 100 users, because you don't need to worry about each of those devices to be able to connect. And now those are the baby steps to go into bring your own device policy. We have clients that are thinking about letting users come in and new hires bring their own devices to connect using their application, just downloading the application to be able to connect to the virtual desktop technology infrastructure. So with that said, again, it will give you a contained environment on the cloud, secured, with setups with multi-factor authentication and alerts and everything that you need. that in combination with Microsoft 365 Cloud Services is like a great combo, because now you have the ability to use most likely what you have, and this is targeted to small, like small business that might be too small to get a virtual desktop environment. They don't want to worry about having servers on the cloud, but they have handfuls of PCs. They might have a PC or two that are sharing data or have applications installed, but they need to still collaborate. They still want to give business continuity to the staff. Well, Microsoft have now rebrand their Office 365 subscription name. They are calling them now Microsoft 365, and they're adding many new features that are targeted to security. I will definitely encourage you to review those. The pricing have stayed the same, and things that have added to these services that will provide remote access and business continuity is the addition to a Windows device to Azure Active Directory. So what that does is you don't need to worry to have servers to let you join to domain, but you're now leveraging Microsoft Azure Active Directory, and now you can have experience what big firms have with what they call domains and domain controllers. You can migrate your company data from those workstations that are sharing ad hoc and move it to SharePoint, and you will be able to have full access. You can have permissions set up properly through your users. You can migrate personal user data where they might have on shared drive into their own OneDrive repositories within the subscription of the firm. So in case somebody is furloughed or let go, you always have access and make sure that that data is secured. You can deploy Office web apps to mobile devices to your staff so they can get that data on the go from their mobile devices without, again, thinking about, virtual desktop is too much for me, Tony. I really need to leverage this business continuity. Well, Microsoft is providing you this with these tools that I'm referring to. And lastly, Microsoft Teams. It's a great collaboration tool in video conferencing you definitely need to use, because that will give you the ability to interact with your peers. We'll be able to share data, and it's much more than just a video conferencing tool. And lastly, on security considerations, Microsoft have added to this subscription many features that before there was not included, and you need to pay extra for it. One of them was advanced threat protection. And that is the ability to Microsoft scan emails and URLs and do sandboxing and make sure that those links that you receive on emails are safe. That was something that you needed to pay before. Now it's included. Also, Microsoft Intune. This is a great tool for controlling. It's a mobile device management application, cloud-based, that will be able to control systems that are joined to Azure Directory or joined to your firm's domain or outside, and will let you set up policies that will let that system either connect or not to OneDrive or SharePoint. You will be able to create alerts and data loss policies to know exactly where the data is flowing, when the data is leaving your firm or not. And lastly, it's a great tool to learn about is Azure Information Protection. What that does is it creates a security environment for specific data that you want to share outside the firm. So no matter where you send it to, it could be somebody with a Gmail account, a contractor that you're working with, but if you said that that only person can read that data, he's the only one who will be able to read it. If that person received that data and tried to forward to somebody else, they won't be able because it's already encrypted. This is a great tool to look into that will give you security to this business continuity ecosystem that you want to create. So with that said, I would like to have a second poll question. Are you more productive when working from home? Yes or no? I can see the answers. It's amazing. 74% are more productive working from home. I'm glad to hear that. Definitely, company owners and businesses needs to take consideration and very hard to check on security, because we want to make sure that you guys are secured. So with that, I finished my presentation. I'm going to pass it to Holly so she can talk about PaperSafe.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tony. And that was interesting on the poll. I've actually worked from home for over 14 years, so I definitely think I get to be more productive working in a home environment. Well, as we transition into the last and final section of today's presentation, PaperSave is an application that is developed by White Owl. And its primary focus is helping you manage your documents and processes electronically. So how can PaperSave help when we think about business continuity in that perspective? Well, one is we can access those documents right from within a web browser. So that means we're taking down some of those walls. So if you need a document, all you need is a browser to get to it, and obviously security credentials. But that way you're not limited to what may be in your corporate office that you don't have access to today. You also can participate in workflow or approval processes right from that same web browser. So we can make sure those processes continue even during a pandemic, or as we look beyond the pandemic to how our business operations may be changing in our work environment. Now, the most important thing is you've heard thus far through today's presentation, it is all about security. So PaperSave is in a cloud environment. It's actually built within the Microsoft Azure cloud. And we have undergone a SOC Type 2 audit that verifies and validates our security policies and procedures to make sure that your documents are contained and secure. It is integrated in with Active Directory, so those are some of the things that CK was talking about, and making sure that only those who are being authenticated can get into that environment and have access to those documents. Now, we have heard a lot from our existing clients, and it really reinforces why we do what we do. So just a couple quotes from them. One is from the Goodwill in Great Plains, and they wrote to us and let us know how grateful they are that they made that transition to PaperSafe, because we were able to help them continue their AP functions with everybody working remotely, and that's really worked very well for them. The next quote is from a food manufacturer based in the Jacksonville area. We probably know them as Bubba Burgers, which if we've gone to the grocery store and looked in the frozen burger section, you've probably seen their hamburgers there. But they stated that our product PaperSave has been the reason that they've been able to keep their business continuity intact while moving 100% of the people out of their offices to their home office. So it's great to know that as we kind of quickly exited that corporate office, that these people's processes did not come to a halt. Now, several of the key features that we'll actually take a look at today, because we want to show you a little bit about what the software does. One is our OCR engine, and OCR stands for Optical Character Recognition. Now, it's pretty neat technology because it actually helps us reduce keystrokes to create transactions in our ERP systems. So for example, instead of having to key in an average of 60 different characters to create an invoice, what the OCR engine will do is it will optically read the documents and extract information like vendor name, invoice date, invoice amount, dollar amount, PO, and so forth. So it not just makes us more efficient from that perspective of data entry, but also reduces the number of data entry errors that are created. We offer real-time integration to ERP applications. So what that means is it's not that it just captures the information and then you have to go through an import process. We are integrated out of the box with several ERP applications, so you don't have to import data. You don't have to do batch uploads. You push a button and it creates a transaction, and we'll take a look at that. We also are enabling people to simplify their month-end closing processes, as well as their audits, because a lot of ERP systems come with query tools. So if you wanted to create a query around, anything that's out there in process but yet not in your ERP system for accruals, right? You can do that in the system. Or if your auditors are coming in and you want to pull all documents, maybe that were coded to a certain location or certain GL account, maybe for a certain time frame over a certain dollar amount. The ERP applications have these query tools, and with PaperSave, within one click, you can pull those supporting documents. So we really focus on not just giving you access to information, but helping you also reduce those repetitive processes of filing a document, of keying data into a system, pulling documents one by one by one. And of course, back to security, because we have to make sure that environments are secure. The environment is not just secure, but once you get into the environment, you can define what a user has access to. And the system also tracks an audit log, so you know who's viewed, printed, saved, emailed documents within the system. So PaperSave is integrated with several ERP applications. And on the next slide, we'll take a look at those. We offer the integration with the latest Microsoft cloud-based accounting platform called D365 Business Central. We also offer integrations with Sage Intacct for those nonprofits that may be on the phone that use the Financial Edge NXT application. We integrate with there. And then we also integrate with the classic Dynamics applications, both Dynamics GP, Dynamics SL, and Dynamics CRM. So now what I want to do is I'm going to take control of the screen, and I want to go in and show you just a few features and what those look like within the application. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so now you all are looking at the home page of PaperSave. So when we talk about removing repetitive tasks, the neat thing when we talk about accounts payable process, many of y'all probably notice that more and more of your vendors and suppliers are emailing you those invoices. Well, those can be acquired into the system automatically, okay? Now for the paper that comes in, we can drop those in a scanner, or we can upload them as well. So here within the PaperSafe start screen, we can look at that central navigation, and it's pretty clear, right? If we want to acquire a document, we can go directly into it. Now on this screen, it's going to allow us to do a couple things. Do we want to acquire a document into a workflow? Do we want to acquire a document maybe to a vendor or a customer or purchase order? So we can kind of select here what we want to add into the system, or for those records that we recently accessed, we have this section on the bottom part of the screen. So we can go directly into there. So I'm just going to select a workflow that I recently went into, and we'll go ahead and I'm going to just drag and drop, or actually, you know what, let me just select some files and we'll pull them in here. Okay, so keep in mind, if you're scanning, we can get the documents in through a scanner. If they're coming in through email, think of that as touchless, right? We don't even have to do anything to have visibility into those documents in our process. Now I can batch documents together. So think of this as like a coupling of documents. So if I want to track the documents that I acquired today, right now, I can create a batch. I can have it auto-generated. It's just an option based on people's processes. Now you'll notice here, I've got several documents that are sitting out there where it says OCR completed. So that means the system has actually gone through and read that information. Other documents, you'll notice those that I just brought in are being OCR'd. So the way that the system works is it comes with a master definition, and that master definition, think of that as logic. So it's looking at each document, it's looking at identifiers from one vendor to another vendor, like invoice NO, INV #, invoice number. You know, these are different ways that our vendors commonly refer to that invoice number. So right out of the box, PaperSafe is going to read those documents, and it's going to be able to extract that information and place the information from here over to the profile that you see to the right side of the screen. Now you'll notice here, PaperSafe also tells you the % accuracy, right? So it's looking at, okay, how confident is it that that data is correct? Now you'll notice vendor is a little bit lower. And the reason why is it's not just extracting the vendor name, but it's also validating that data against your vendor table in the ERP systems that I mentioned. Okay, so that way when we go to create a transaction, it knows specifically that vendor ID that transaction is going to be created for. Okay, from here, if we need to select a reviewer, you know, we can go ahead and select a reviewer from that list of reviewers. So these are the people who are participating in the process. If we need to do a distribution, meaning distribute it to the GL accounts or dimensions, right? Right here, I can just start typing in a name, and you'll notice that it filters and brings up a value for me. And that's just basically saving me some keystrokes, because that way I don't have to pop up a secondary screen, although of course you can if you'd like to. And you can search based on name, number, you know, because if you think about it, people in the back office functions will know the account structure. Maybe some of your reviewers or approvers that need to distribute if the GL distribution on the invoice may not be as familiar. So they may think of it in terms of descriptions for the account rather than an account number. Okay, so now if we just weren't ready and we're ready to submit this right into the workflow, we can do that, and then you can see how those other documents have been completed. And if I want to pull up one of those other documents, I have that capability. So just as an example, right, it read this invoice and it was able to extract that data and pull that data right over to the profile. Okay, now approvers are going to interact with the workflow. They'll be able to get email alerts. They can also interact with the workflow through their mobile devices. So no longer do we have to wait for that piece of paper to land on our desk. PaperSafe is going to deliver it to them electronically. But here in this view, it's going to allow you to have insight to know what is out there in your process, right? So let's say, for example, a vendor calls, okay, and you know, might not even know if you've received the document. Well, right here in this quick find area, we could quickly type in maybe that vendor name, vendor name, invoice number, right? It's going to search through that entire list, and it's going to show you those documents that, you know, fit that criteria that you just searched on, right? So here, just as an example, I can see that I could, you know, first of all, quickly and easily pull up that document. And then if I'm the approver and I need to approve it, right, you'll notice right here within inside of PaperSafe, you can approve it and you can reject it, right, based on the way that your workflow is configured. Now, in this sample configuration, what I did is right from a workflow step, I had the system actually create the transaction in the ERP. So right here, I am pulling up Business Central to give you an idea of that integration. And if I navigate through Business Central to maybe those list of those purchase invoices, right, and let me go ahead and I'm going to scroll down, and you'll notice here W. Mason. So that's the invoice that I just created. Okay, and if I want to view it, I can come and view that transaction. So we saved all those keystrokes in actually creating it. And now we didn't even have to file that document. All we had to do was capture it. So we're saving on average 23 to 30% of our day that's spent filing, searching, and retrieving information. Because right here from that transaction, you'll notice show documents. And what that's designed to do is that calls on PaperSave and it brings up that document for me. Okay, so here, talking about that audit trail, here you'll notice who approved it. You can see that user. You can also see the date and time that activity was performed. So you have a full audit trail of every single touch on that document from the point in time that it's received to the point in time that you decide it's time to purge it based on your record retention rules. Now, obviously, this was just a very quick overview of the system, but you can see how easy it is to still continue to manage your process, have access to your information, and also in the process becoming more efficient and eliminating a lot of those repetitive tasks that you might currently be dealing with. So I will we'll go back to the slide deck, and then we can continue the presentation since we do have a few minutes left.
Okay, great presentation. Great presentation. Thank you both, Holly and Tony. I think there are certainly key solutions for firms to become 100% digital and be ready for security and continuity in the age of COVID-19. We have a couple of minutes for a few questions that were presented to us beforehand. The first question is, how can smaller entities mitigate cyber attacks with limited resources? I'm sorry, there is a poll quiz going on. I'm sorry. I'll wait a bit.
Great. So what ERP system do you all use? So what do you use for accounting? Here are some of the popular options that are used in the marketplace. So thank you for answering. Great. So it looks like we've got a quarter of the attendees that use QuickBooks. A couple use the Mass 90 or through Mass 500 solutions. Over half use other applications, and about 11% use GP. So thank you for that. Also, we did have a brief question that I'll go ahead and answer live just because we are getting into the questions. Somebody asked a question about, can you highlight lines within a document and make notes within? And the answer there is yes, you absolutely can, because you do have annotations, and those annotations can be highlights, could be text. You can also redact information, so any healthcare organizations or organizations that are concerned about PCI compliance and credit card information, you do have the ability to control that, as well as hide information on a document so that only certain users can see information or areas on the document. So I'll give it back to you, Christian.
All right, thank you, Holly. Thank you once again. Great presentation. All right, so let's go to over a few other questions from the audience. And one is, how can smaller entities mitigate cyber attacks with limited resources? It's a great question. I used to say with unlimited resources, you could actually bankrupt the company just by purchasing cybersecurity components. So there's not an easy answer for you, but I think you should look to integrate as much as possible. So instead of acquiring isolated components such as a SIM for monitoring, or email security, another for network security, endpoint security for the vendors, try to integrate as much as possible. And I would look very careful to use the cloud, just as Tony presented. Microsoft recently really enriched a lot. Their security stack is almost complete at this moment. So I would start by looking at Office 365, no, Microsoft 365 as a serious candidate for security. Plus, it's scalable. It varies according to the number of users that you have. Another question we have, it's actually a related question, is what is the one thing I can do to get the biggest bang for my security buck? So to answer that question, you really need to conduct a risk assessment. So look at what threats and vulnerabilities you have surrounding your environment. Look at what is the financial impact that, is if these abilities get exploited. What is going to be the financial impact in your company, and then to mitigate that risk, how much money you will spend. So those columns, like the risk and how much you spend, is going to be your guidance to prioritize your investment. So that's, I think, the methodological way of doing. If you want to start by in more tentative and error, which I will not suggest, but I will look at activities surrounding the user, like email activity and web browsing. I hope that answers your question. I have another question, is we use Abila MIP, so when you have it incompatible with system paperless, sounds great. If the person referring to PaperSafe, oh, it's just a comment. Holly, do you have Abila MIP? Is PaperSafe compatible?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, we don't have the integration today with Abila MIP, but it is. We are looking at other applications that we extend into, but there's not something that we have on the roadmap right now.
Okay, great. I hope that integration comes soon. Okay, I think we are running out of time. That's what we have for today. Once again, on my behalf of the presenters, thank you for joining us for this presentation.